At 58, I thought I had it all: an executive title, seven-figure bonuses, and respect that followed me into every boardroom. I lived in glass towers and signed deals that reshaped companies. But all of that shattered the moment my daughter looked me dead in the eyes and asked, "Do you even know what my favorite color is?" My voice caught. I wanted to answer, but nothing came. I could list our quarterly revenue, remember the names of every CEO I ever negotiated with, but I couldn't recall my own daughter's favorite color. That night, I found a shoebox in the attic, filled with drawings she had made over the years. In every one, our house was bright and warm, but I was never in them. Sometimes it was just her and her mom. Sometimes just the house. But not once did she draw me in. I spent 25 years climbing the ladder. I bought her every gadget, paid for private school, saved for her college. But I missed the bedtime stories, the scraped knees, the first heartbreak. I missed being her father. And when I tried to fix things, I realized there's no shortcut to rebuilding trust. It's not about gifts. It's about presence. If you've ever told yourself, "I'll make it up later," this story is for you. Because sometimes later never comes. My name is David Callahan. I'm 58 years old, and I spent most of my life trying to outrun a childhood that clung to me like a shadow. I grew up in a small Rust Belt town in Ohio, where the factories were either shutting down or running skeleton crews. My father left when I was 7. One morning, he packed a single duffel bag and said he had to go find himself. We never heard from him again. My mother worked double shifts at a diner to keep the lights on. Some nights we ate canned beans and rice. Others, just rice. I remember being so embarrassed at school that I'd hide my lunch behind my textbooks. I told myself, swore to myself, that my kids would never know that feeling. That gut punch of being forgotten. That shame of not having enough. I would be everything my father wasn't. Reliable, present, a provider. That vow became the fire that fueled me. When I turned 18, I left home with a duffel of my own, but not to disappear. I was chasing something better. I clawed my way into a state college on a partial scholarship, worked nights unloading trucks to cover the rest. I had no time for parties or spring breaks. Every minute was a stepping stone out of poverty. In my junior year, I interned at a mid-sized investment firm in Cincinnati. I wore my only suit 3 days a week, kept the cuffs clean with a toothbrush. I fetched coffee, made copies, shadowed analysts, and studied every move the partners made, like my life depended on it. Because it did. That's where I met Lily. She was a kindergarten teacher at a public school downtown. We met at a networking event I'd crashed with a fake name tag and borrowed tie. I spilled club soda on her by accident. She laughed, said I looked like a deer in headlights. She had these eyes that didn't just see you, they studied you, understood you. I remember thinking, she smiles like someone who grew up loved. We were opposites in every way. She'd come from a tight-knit family, Sunday dinners and holiday traditions. I had learned to eat alone and work through holidays, but she grounded me, reminded me there was more to life than the next milestone. We got married 2 years later in a courthouse ceremony. I wore my internship suit again, still the only one I owned. We couldn't afford a honeymoon, but we had plans, big ones. We moved into a small apartment with beige walls and mismatched furniture, and I promised her that one day she'd have a home with a garden, a porch swing, maybe even a view. When we found out she was pregnant, I cried. Not just because I was going to be a father, but because I was terrified I wouldn't know how. I doubled down, took a junior analyst position, then a senior one. I stayed late, came in early, never said no to extra work. Every raise, every promotion, I saw as proof I was doing the right thing. Providing, building something. Each new title was a brick in the future I was constructing for Lily and our daughter. I was still home most nights in those early years. I made bottle runs at 2 a.m., changed diapers, read bedtime stories with voices that made Lily laugh. On Sundays, we had pancake mornings, just the three of us, and every time I held my daughter, I whispered, "You'll never go hungry, not on my watch." But somewhere along the way, providing began to replace participating. I justified the missed dinners. It's just this week. I rationalized the late nights. Once this project's done, I'll take some time. I started bringing my laptop to the kitchen table, then to the couch, then to the nursery. The first time Lily asked me if I remembered what color we painted the baby's room, I froze. "Blue," I guessed. She looked away. "We painted it yellow." I laughed it off. Close enough. But it wasn't. It was a warning I didn't hear. By the time I turned 40, I had everything I used to dream about on cold Ohio nights. I was the vice president of finance at a billion-dollar firm. I had a reserved parking space, my own glass-walled office overlooking the skyline, and a six-figure salary with stock options to match. My signature moved millions. My phone buzzed with urgency. My name carried weight. And yet, I was becoming a ghost in my own home. Meetings ran late. Business dinners blurred into networking events. One promotion led to another strategic project, which led to a new acquisition, and then another. The calendar was packed, my inbox overflowing, and I told myself it was all for them, for Lily and Grace. Grace was 7 when I missed my first parent-teacher conference. I had a quarterly review with the board and couldn't reschedule. I told Lily to take notes and promised I'd read them that night. I didn't. I missed her school play a month later because of a flight delay after a client pitch in Boston. Then her birthday dinner because of an unexpected investor dinner. I told myself these were exceptions, rare sacrifices, but they weren't. They were becoming the rule. One evening, I came home late again, past 9. I loosened my tie, tossed my briefcase on the couch, and headed toward the kitchen. Lily was there, finishing dishes. She didn't look up. "She waited for you," she said softly. "For what?" "Her drawing," Lily replied, turning off the tap. "She sat at the front door with it for 3 hours. She wanted to show you." I rubbed my eyes. "Why didn't you tell her to just leave it on my desk? I would have seen it later." "She didn't want you to just see it, David. She wanted to see you see it." Something twisted in my chest, but I brushed it off. "I'll look at it in the morning. Where is it?" Lily didn't answer. The next morning, I found the drawing in the trash under some used paper towels. Crayon lines, bright colors, a messy sketch of our family. Lily holding Grace's hand in a sunny backyard. There was a third figure in the background, behind a window, holding a phone. I stared at it longer than I wanted to admit. Then I folded it quietly and placed it in my briefcase. By the time Grace turned 8, I had started using work as an escape. At the office, I was in control. Deadlines, metrics, forecasts, they made sense. At home, things were harder. Grace had begun pulling away. Her bedtime stories were now handled by Lily. She stopped asking if I'd be home for dinner. Eventually, she stopped asking anything at all. I told myself I'd make it up during vacation. But vacations turned into staycations, and staycations turned into just a quick email or just one call. My laptop was always within reach. My presence was always partial. Lily, to her credit, tried. She would hand me Grace's artwork, send me reminders about school events, leave sticky notes with "don't forget" messages. I collected them like trophies, like proof that I still had a place. But I rarely followed through. Once, during a particularly hectic month, Lily sat across from me at the dinner table, watching me reply to emails while Grace ate silently between us. "Do you even know what she's learning in school right now?" she asked. I blinked, looked up. "Of course. Math. Reading." "She wrote a poem yesterday," Lily said. "It was about stars and shadows. She wanted to read it to you." I glanced at Grace, who was staring into her plate. "That's great, sweetheart," I said. She didn't respond. Later that night, Lily left a note on my pillow. "She stopped drawing you in her pictures 2 months ago." I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember the last time Grace had hugged me without being asked. I couldn't. Still, the next morning, I was back in the office before sunrise, reviewing financial models and leading strategy sessions. I told myself that consistency mattered, that I was building stability. But the truth? I was building a life without them in it. I told myself it was all temporary, that the missed birthdays, the empty seats at school recitals, the unanswered bedtime questions, they were just bumps in the road, necessary sacrifices on the way to giving my family the life I never had. "I'm doing this for us," I repeated like a mantra. "Just a few more years. Then I'll slow down. We'll travel. I'll coach her soccer team. I'll be present." But a few more years turned into a few more deals, then a promotion, then an industry award. The treadmill never stopped, and I never stepped off. Every time Lily brought up how much I was missing, I responded with numbers. The new bonus, the college fund, the home equity increase, as if dollars could fill the gaps where memories should have been. One evening, after another 12-hour day, I came home to find the kitchen quiet, lights dimmed. On the dining table, beside my unopened mail and some scattered receipts, was a sheet of paper with bold, uneven strokes, Grace's handwriting. Above it, in red crayon, was written, "To Daddy, I drew us." I stared at it for a moment, then shifted it aside to make room for my laptop. There was a quarterly forecast due in the morning. I had every intention of looking at the drawing later, but by the time I finished my emails, I'd forgotten it was even there. The next morning, Lily found it under a coffee mug, stained and bent. She didn't say anything, just picked it up, wiped the edge, and placed it in a drawer. That silence stung more than any argument we'd ever had, but I still didn't stop. Somewhere along the way, I'd convinced myself that presence was negotiable, that quality time was enough, even if it came once a month, squeezed between calls, that my daughter would understand when she was older, that Lily knew I loved her, even if I forgot our anniversary. I wasn't a bad husband or father, I told myself. I was a busy one. Then, one Saturday morning, while organizing my desk, I came across a pile of papers stacked between client reports and old meeting notes. Colorful edges peeked out from the sides, purples, blues, bright yellows. Curious, I pulled them out. Drawings, all by Grace. One had a castle with a princess and her mom. Another showed a sunny day at the park, Grace and Lily on a bench, an empty space beside them. Others had a recurring figure in the background, always small, always facing away, always holding something that looked suspiciously like a phone. There were dates in the corner of each page, weeks apart, some months. I realized with a sinking stomach. She'd been leaving these for me regularly, quietly, hopefully. And I hadn't noticed. I hadn't seen them, hadn't asked, hadn't cared. I had assumed they were leftover schoolwork or junk mail, clutter that got swept into drawers or the trash. I remembered one night a few months back when I'd thrown away a stack of papers from my desk while clearing space. Grace had walked into the room just as I did. She paused, looked at the bin, then at me, her mouth opening slightly before closing again. She didn't say anything. Now I knew why. It wasn't just that I didn't see her drawings. It was that she saw me throw them away. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the pile of papers. So many images, so many versions of our family, always incomplete, always missing someone. Me. I had spent years crafting a perfect narrative. I was the provider, the protector, the one who made the mortgage disappear and the lights stay on. I wore my sacrifices like a badge of honor. But now, those sacrifices looked a lot more like negligence, like absence wrapped in ambition. And ambition, I realized, was a hungry god, one that demanded offerings. I had given it my time, my energy, my marriage, and now, my daughter's trust. Still, even then, I didn't make a change. I stacked the drawings neatly, tied them with a rubber band, and placed them in the drawer. I told myself I'd talk to Grace about them that weekend, that I'd take her out for ice cream, ask her about school, try again. But that weekend never came. There was a time when Grace would run to the door the second she heard my car in the driveway, her arms wide open, crayon smudges on her cheeks, screaming, "Daddy!" like the word itself was made of joy. Now she barely looked up. "Hi, Dad," she'd mumble without lifting her eyes from the TV or her sketch pad. Sometimes it wasn't even Dad. Sometimes when talking to Lily, I was just him. "Is he home? Did he say anything about Saturday? Can you ask him if I can go to Emma's?" The first time I heard it, I froze in the hallway. Him. Like I was a tenant, or worse, a stranger. I stood there for a moment, one hand still on my tie, waiting for some sort of correction. It never came. That night, I brought home her favorite ice cream, mint chocolate chip, the brand she used to insist on when we went grocery shopping together. I handed it to her like a peace offering. She took it politely, murmured, "Thanks," and disappeared into her room. No hug, no smile, just a quiet closing of the door. I turned to Lily. "She's been distant lately." Lily didn't respond right away. She rinsed a plate under the faucet, eyes focused on nothing. "She's adjusting," she finally said. "To what?" "To life without her father, even when he's in the house." It felt like a slap. "But I'm here," I argued. "I come home every night. I'm not out at bars. I'm not—" Lily put the plate down. "David, you're physically here. But emotionally, she hasn't felt you in years." I wanted to protest, to pull out the numbers, the bills I paid, the things I provided. But I could already hear the hollowness in the argument before it left my lips. Instead, I went to my office and stared at my email inbox. In meetings, I'd say things like, "We need to manage expectations. Let's circle back." Or, "I'll get you those numbers by EOD." They all made sense. They followed a system. They produced results. But at home, there was no system, no EOD, no metrics to measure the cost of missed dinners or silent car rides. Grace started drawing less. I noticed the shift not because I saw fewer drawings, those had stopped months ago, but because I realized I hadn't seen her with markers or crayons in weeks. Lily, too, was changing. She still asked how my day went, but without curiosity. Her questions were placeholders, meant to keep peace at the dinner table, not to build connection. "Everything okay at work?" she'd ask while passing the salt. "Busy as always," I'd reply, hoping for more. She never followed up. We went from conversations to logistics, schedules, groceries, school pickups, holidays, nothing deeper than the surface. Some nights I came home to find them already done with dinner, my plate wrapped in foil, sitting on the stove. I'd eat alone while they watched a movie in the living room, laughter echoing behind the wall. And I couldn't shake the feeling that I was intruding in my own home. Grace stopped waiting up for me. Her bedtime stories became Lily's domain. I offered once, awkwardly, to read with her. "I'm already done," she said. The next morning, I found her in the kitchen before school, pouring cereal with robotic precision. "Hey, kiddo," I said. "How'd you sleep?" She shrugged. "Do anything fun yesterday?" She shook her head. "Want me to drive you today?" She paused, spoon halfway to her mouth. "Mom said she would." "She's busy this morning." A moment's hesitation, then a nod. The car ride was quiet. I tried small talk, music, teachers, even a joke. Nothing stuck. As she got out, she mumbled, "Thanks," and closed the door. Watching her walk into the school building, backpack bouncing with each step, I realized I didn't know her anymore. I didn't know her favorite book, her favorite color, whether she liked gym class or hated it. I didn't know who her best friend was. I didn't know what made her laugh. And worse, I wasn't sure she knew me either. That night, I mentioned to Lily that I wanted to take Grace out, just the two of us. She hesitated. "I think you should give her some time." "Time?" I asked. "To do what? Forget me?" Lily looked at me tired, not angry, just worn out. "No," she said. "To heal from you." That one landed deeper than I expected. I'd always assumed I was the one holding everything up, bearing the weight, carrying the burden of success for our family. But maybe, just maybe, I was the one everyone else was learning to live without. There was a time when Grace would draw little comics about my job. Stick figures in suits, speech bubbles saying things like, "Meeting at 3" or "Get that deal." Her idea of what I did was vague, but she loved imagining me as a superhero in a tie. I used to hang them on the fridge like badges of honor. Those comics stopped coming. I hadn't noticed right away. The fridge filled instead with permission slips, grocery lists, and reminders to take out the trash. One evening, I stood in front of it, just staring, unsure when the last drawing had disappeared. At the dinner table, conversations no longer started with, "How was your day, Daddy?" Lily didn't ask about meetings. Grace didn't ask if I had signed another contract or traveled anywhere interesting. The silence was surgical, not cruel, just clinical. As if they had quietly adjusted to a life where my days didn't matter. And maybe to them, they didn't. They ate dinner before I got home now. I'd come in to find empty plates in the sink and mine sitting on the stove, foil covering the steam that had long since vanished. I'd sit at the table alone, chewing through a meal Lily had carefully prepared hours earlier. Sometimes, Grace would walk through the room, heading toward her bedroom, earbuds in. She'd nod politely, then disappear. I remember one evening clearly. I got home a bit earlier than usual, just before 7. I was proud of myself. I'd left a meeting halfway through, telling my assistant to reschedule. I walked in, hoping to surprise them. Maybe even eat together, like we used to. The table was already cleared. Grace and Lily were on the couch, watching a movie. Grace was curled under a blanket, Lily's hand resting gently on her daughter's head. I stood at the edge of the room, unsure whether to join or retreat. Lily noticed me first. "Hey," she said, neutral. Grace didn't look away from the screen. "I came home early," I offered, hoping that alone would bridge the gap. "That's nice," Lily replied. "Dinner's on the stove." And that was that. I sat alone again, chewing in silence, wondering how something as simple as a meal could feel like a wake. It wasn't just dinners. Saturdays had changed too. We used to have pancake mornings, board games, afternoon walks in the park. Now they made plans without me. Craft fairs, library visits, brunch with Lily's sister. I'd find out after the fact, when I noticed the house was empty and the silence too sharp. When I asked about it once, Lily simply said, "We didn't want to interrupt your schedule." She meant it. That was the terrifying part. They weren't punishing me. They were adapting to me. One day, I noticed an empty space on Lily's desk, where a photo of us used to sit. Our wedding day, grainy and golden. I asked her about it. "Frame broke," she said. "Want me to get a new one?" She shrugged. "I don't know where the picture is." I let it go, but the absence lingered like smoke. Even my office at home had changed. Once it had been filled with Grace's doodles, sticky notes from Lily saying, "We love you," or "Don't work too hard." They had vanished. Now the desk was sterile. Just my laptop, a notepad, and whatever deal I was chasing that week. I started noticing things in retrospect. Moments I had missed while they were happening. The birthday card Grace gave me last year, it hadn't said "Love your daughter." It had just said "Grace." The Christmas gift she gave me. A tie, still in its box, unopened on my shelf months later. I hadn't thanked her. The day Lily stopped saying "Be safe" when I left for work. It had been replaced by "Lock the door on your way out." I had told myself for years that I was sacrificing for them, that my absence was noble. But noble sacrifices don't feel like abandonment. And my family wasn't angry. They were adjusting, accommodating the loss, like you would for someone who had passed away. Only I hadn't died. I was just busy. And when people stop expecting you to show up, they stop inviting you altogether. One night, I found Lily sitting on the porch with a glass of wine. Grace was already asleep. I sat down beside her, hoping to reconnect. "It's been a long week," I said. She sipped her wine. "I know I haven't been around," I added. "I'm trying." She looked at me, eyes soft but distant. "You know what I realized today?" she said. "What?" "I don't set an extra plate anymore, even when I think you might come home early." That cut deeper than I expected. Not because she was angry, but because she wasn't. It happened on a Thursday. A quiet, ordinary, forgettable kind of day. The kind of day you never expect to hold a memory sharp enough to leave a scar. I was working from home, something I rarely did. The firm had recently rolled out a hybrid policy, and I figured showing my face on Zoom was enough to keep my name relevant. It was almost noon when I heard Grace laughing from her room, the kind of laugh that made me pause. It wasn't loud, it wasn't wild. It was soft, guarded, the kind of laugh that comes with being comfortable with someone. I stepped quietly into the hallway. Her door was slightly ajar. I wasn't eavesdropping, at least that's what I told myself, but something about the sound pulled me in. "Yeah," I heard her say. "He used to read me books, do voices and everything, even made up endings sometimes." A pause. "But now, I don't know. I guess I used to have a dad. Not sure anymore." I stopped breathing. Her voice hadn't cracked. There was no anger in it, no bitterness, just a quiet acceptance that gutted me. "I used to have a dad." She was 12. And in her mind, I was already past tense. I backed away from the door, my legs suddenly heavy. I sat in my office and stared at my laptop screen for 20 minutes without moving. Emails came in, notifications buzzed, but the only sound I could hear was her voice, echoing like a ghost. I used to have a dad. That night, I didn't say anything. I didn't bring it up at dinner. I didn't tell Lily. I just ate my food, nodded at whatever small talk Lily attempted, and excused myself early. I stared at the ceiling for hours, the silence inside me louder than anything outside. The next morning, my inbox pinged with a new message. Subject line, "If I left, would you notice?" It was from Lily. I opened it, expecting a link, an article, maybe something light. What I got instead was a slow, precise gutting of my illusion. "David, this isn't a threat. It's not a cry for attention. It's just a check-in. With myself. With you. With what's left of us. I've been wondering lately. If I packed my things quietly, took Grace with me to my sister's place for a while, would you notice? Would you feel the absence? Or would it just give you more time to focus? I don't hate you. I'm not even angry anymore. That's the part that scares me. Anger means there's something left to fight for. What I feel now is just space, distance. I sleep beside you, but we haven't touched in weeks. You sit at the table, but you're never really there. Grace walks past you, and you don't even look up. You're a kind man, David, a hard worker. But being good at your job doesn't make you a husband or a father. I'm not asking you to fix this. I'm not even sure it can be fixed. I just want to know, if I left, would you notice? L. I read it 3 times. Then I sat in my chair and stared at my reflection in the dark window. I thought of the last time Lily had laughed. Truly laughed. I couldn't remember. I thought of Grace's drawings, the ones I'd ignored, the ones I'd thrown away. I thought of the missed recitals, the unanswered, "Look at this, Daddy" moments, and I realized something I should have known all along. Grief doesn't always show up with screaming or slamming doors. Sometimes it's quiet, polite, patient. It slips into empty chairs at dinner. It lingers in unanswered texts. It lives in the silence between sentences. And if you're not careful, it becomes the default. My home had been grieving me for years, long before I noticed. That night I tried to talk to Lily, but the words felt thin, insincere. I sat next to her on the couch, reached for her hand. She didn't pull away, but she didn't hold back either. Just stillness. It felt like holding smoke. When she went to bed early, I stayed behind. The living room was dim, a single lamp casting shadows across the carpet. I stared at the family photo on the shelf. The 3 of us, smiling, frozen in time. I whispered to no one, "I'm still here." But even I didn't believe it. The morning started like any other. Coffee, a tailored suit, and a rush of adrenaline. Today was the big day. The signing of a multi-million-dollar deal that would secure my name in the firm's inner circle for years. I had rehearsed the presentation in my head a dozen times. Numbers, projections, ROI, shareholder growth, it all flowed effortlessly. This was what I had built my life around. I barely glanced at my phone before heading into the office. A single missed call from Lily. No voicemail. I'd call her back after the signing. Priorities. By 10:15 a.m., I was in the boardroom, every eye on me. I smiled, confident. Executives nodded as I clicked through the final slides. We shook hands, signed contracts, posed for pictures. I remember laughing with the CFO about retirement plans. Then my phone buzzed again. 3 missed calls. Lily, again. And a text. Grace is in the ER, bike accident, she's unconscious. The room blurred. I excused myself without explanation. In the elevator, I called Lily, straight to voicemail. The silence in response was louder than any ringtone. 20 minutes later, I rushed into the hospital, heart pounding, tie loose, briefcase still in hand. The antiseptic smell, the fluorescent lighting, it all felt surreal, like stepping into someone else's crisis. At the front desk, I stammered, "My daughter, Grace Callahan, 12 years old, bike accident." The nurse looked up. "Are you the father?" The question hit harder than it should have. "Yes," I said, after a beat too long. She nodded, pointed me down the hall. Outside the room, Lily stood with her arms crossed, face pale. Her eyes met mine but held no warmth. "What happened?" I asked. "She was riding her bike to Emma's," she said, voice flat. "She lost control going downhill. Helmet cracked, mild concussion, dislocated shoulder." "Why didn't you call me sooner?" "I did," she said. 3 times. "I didn't see." "No," she cut in. "You didn't check." I swallowed hard. "Why didn't you leave a voicemail?" She looked at me like I was speaking a different language. "Because I knew you wouldn't listen to it." The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. We stood there in silence until the doctor approached. "She's stable," he said, "still groggy from the meds. Would you like to see her?" We both nodded. Inside the room, Grace lay small and fragile under thin hospital blankets, a bandage across her forehead, an IV drip humming steadily beside her. I approached the bed slowly. "Grace?" I whispered. Her eyelids fluttered but didn't open. I turned to Lily. "Has she said anything?" "She asked for me," she said, "and then for her sketchbook." I nodded, though I didn't understand why that hurt more than if she had asked for no one at all. The doctor returned with forms. "We need a signature from her primary guardian," he said, glancing between us. "Father or mother?" He looked at me. For a second, I couldn't speak. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the pen. Not because I was unsure of my role, but because, for the first time, I realized I hadn't earned it in years. I was a name on paper, a provider, a financial backer. But a father? I had let that title wither. After signing, I stepped outside for air. The weight of the day pressed against my chest, like a vice. I thought about the deal I'd just closed. The champagne they were probably pouring in the office right now. The congratulatory emails piling up. And none of it mattered. Not in the face of this sterile hallway. The beep of monitors. The hollow ache of being too late. Lily joined me minutes later, arms folded. "She's going to be okay," she said. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "I didn't call at first," she added quietly, "because I didn't want to be disappointed when you didn't answer." The honesty knocked the wind out of me. "She needed you," Lily continued, "and I didn't believe for a second that you'd come." "But I did," I said. "After the contract was signed, after the pictures were taken, after you finished what mattered." I couldn't argue, and for the first time in my adult life, I didn't have a single thing to say that would fix it. Grace woke up later that afternoon. I was sitting just outside her room, nursing a lukewarm coffee I didn't remember buying. When the nurse told us she was conscious, Lily stood immediately. "I'll go in first," she said, her tone not unkind, but firm. I nodded, too ashamed to argue. I watched through the small glass pane as Lily entered. Grace's face lit up, weak but unmistakable joy. She reached for her mother's hand, clutched it like an anchor. They talked quietly, heads close, expressions soft and familiar. After a few minutes, Lily came back out and gently closed the door behind her. "She doesn't want to see you," she said. The words hit with a dull thud, not anger, just clarity. "She's tired," I said, searching for a lifeline. "She's hurt," Lily corrected, "and not just from the fall." I looked away, unable to meet her eyes. She said. Lily paused, then pulled something from her purse. A small, worn notebook with paint smudges on the edges and a sticker of a dolphin on the front. "She wanted me to give you this." I took it carefully. The cover was soft, corners frayed from years of use. "It's her sketch journal," Lily explained. "She's been drawing in it since she was 6. Almost never showed it to anyone. She said if you actually want to know her, you should start with that." I opened it slowly. The first few pages were pure childhood. Stick figures with smiling faces, colorful houses, clumsy letters spelling me and Daddy in bright crayons. Grace had drawn the two of us in parks, in spaceships, even on a pirate ship. I was always there, always holding her hand. As the pages progressed, the drawings matured. More detail, more expression. But I noticed a shift. Fewer scenes with me in them. More with just her and Lily. Some with Grace standing alone, staring at an empty chair or a shadowed doorway. By the middle of the journal, I had become a blur in the background. Sometimes just a briefcase, a phone in a hand, a half-drawn face. I turned the pages slowly, each one heavier than the last. Near the end, there was a drawing of Grace at the dinner table, her plate full, the other seats empty. Then, nothing. The last page was blank, except for a single line in small, careful handwriting at the bottom. "I don't know who to draw anymore." My hands trembled. It wasn't a tantrum, it wasn't spite, it was grief. Silent, accumulating grief in the form of erasure. Not dramatic, not loud, just absence. I stared at that one line until the letters blurred. "I had no idea," I whispered. Lily sat down next to me, folding her hands in her lap. "That's the problem," she said quietly. "You never asked." She wasn't accusing me, just stating a fact. "I thought I was giving her everything," I said. "The best schools, a future, safety, stability." "You gave her security," Lily said. "But she wanted you. Not your money, not your schedule. You." I nodded slowly, still staring at the page. Every time she drew something new, she'd ask if you'd seen it. And every time I said, "He's busy," she'd smile and say, "It's okay. Maybe next week." And then one day, she stopped asking. I closed the notebook gently, as if the sadness inside might spill out if I wasn't careful. "I didn't mean to disappear," I said. "I know," Lily replied. "But you did." There was no heat in her voice, just years of acceptance, finally spoken aloud. "She used to say she wanted to be an artist like you," I murmured. Lily smiled faintly. "She still does. But now she draws what she feels." "What does she feel?" Lily looked at the door. "Alone." The silence between us stretched long and wide. I held the notebook tightly. "I want to fix this." "You can't fix it," she said. "But maybe you can show up every day until showing up means something again." I looked back at the blank page, and for the first time in years, I realized I wasn't the hero in my daughter's story. I wasn't even in it. I didn't go back to the office that week. No one called. No one asked why. The $1 million contract had been signed. The press release had gone out. I had done my job. As far as they were concerned, I was exactly where I was supposed to be, somewhere in the background, waiting for the next fire to put out. But I wasn't in the background anymore. I was drowning in the foreground of my own life. The night after Grace's accident, I sat in my home office, where I'd spent thousands of hours, where I'd missed birthdays, school plays, snow days. I stared at the walls, lined with framed awards and recognition plaques. Top financial strategist, executive of the quarter, a photo with a former governor, a hand-signed thank you letter from a Fortune 500 CEO. But not a single photo of my family, not one. I searched the room like a man realizing his house had been robbed. Shelves stacked with deal binders, market analysis, tax reports, no drawings, no birthday cards, no little sticky notes from Grace. Nothing that made this space feel like it belonged to a husband or a father. Just an office, a shrine to absence. I reached into the drawer and pulled out the sketchbook Lily had given me. I opened it again to that final page. I don't know who to draw anymore. I read it aloud, softly, like a prayer. And then I wept. Not the quiet, composed kind of crying you do in private. I broke. My body shook, fists clenched in my lap, jaw trembling. 20 years of holding it together, all of it splintered in a matter of minutes. It wasn't one thing that shattered me. It was the accumulation of everything. The missed goodnights, the discarded drawings, the way Grace had stopped calling me Daddy, and how I hadn't noticed until it was already too late. I had become the kind of man I used to judge. Distant, distracted, disconnected. A provider who mistook financial stability for emotional presence. I wiped my face with my sleeve and looked up at the wall in front of me. There, in a sleek black frame, was the first contract I ever signed as an executive. Bold signature, gold seal, company logo. I remembered how proud I was when I hung it, how it marked the moment I had made it. Now, it just looked like a certificate of neglect. I stood, walked to the wall, and took it down. The hook left a small dent in the paint. I looked at the empty space and whispered, "That's more honest." Then I pulled down another, Deal of the Year, and another, Client Retention Award. Frame by frame, I removed the trophies that had once defined me. By the time I finished, the wall was bare except for a single nail, crooked, loose, barely holding on. And I thought, that's me. A frame without a picture, a role without a presence, a name without a relationship, a father by title only. I walked through the house slowly, like I was seeing it for the first time. The living room still held echoes of toddler laughter I'd missed. The kitchen smelled faintly of something sweet Lily must have baked earlier. Grace's bedroom door was slightly ajar. I peeked inside. She was sleeping, curled under her blanket, sketchbook resting on her nightstand. A faint nightlight glowed against the wall. I stepped closer, careful not to wake her. On the floor beside her bed were a few scraps of torn paper, half-drawn faces, broken scenes, pieces of what used to be whole. And I realized she hadn't just stopped drawing me. She had tried to erase me altogether. I knelt, quietly gathering the pieces, pressing them together like a puzzle. The images were incomplete. Arms with no hands, faces with no eyes, a house with only 2 figures standing outside. But I recognized the intent. She wasn't angry. She was mourning. I left the pieces where they were and backed out of the room. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for years. This house had kept functioning without me. They had eaten, laughed, cried, healed without me. My absence hadn't created a pause. It had created a new rhythm. one I didn't know the beat to anymore, and that terrified me more than anything. I walked back to my office and stood before the empty wall. For 2 decades, I had tried to frame my worth with job titles and contracts. Now I knew better. I wasn't the man in the family portrait anymore. I was the frame, empty, forgotten, slightly crooked, hanging there, waiting for something to fill it. I submitted my resignation the next morning. No dramatic speech, no big announcement, just a plain email to my supervisor with the subject line, "I'm done." I didn't attach my accomplishments. I didn't list my reasons. I didn't need to. The silence from my daughter and the hollow ache in my home said more than any exit interview ever could. When word got out, my phone lit up. Colleagues, friends, clients. Most thought I was joking. "You're walking away? Now? After that contract? You're finally in line for a partner seat." One friend, a close one, called me during lunch. "David, I've known you 20 years. You've built this. You survived the 2008 crash, led us through 2 mergers, built teams from scratch, and now you're just quitting?" I paused before answering. "I'm not quitting," I said. "I'm starting over." A beat of silence. "You're going to regret this," he warned. 6 months from now, you'll wish you never sent that email." I looked out the window at the late morning sun touching the empty swing in our backyard. "No," I said. "I already regret everything that got me here." Click. Call ended. That afternoon, I cleared my office. I didn't take the awards. I didn't pack the binders. Just a few books, a framed photo Lily had taken of Grace and me back when she was 4, her arms around my neck, grinning like I was her entire world. That photo used to sit on my desk. Somewhere along the way, I replaced it with a quarterly projection report. I drove home slower than usual, windows down, letting the wind remind me how long it had been since I'd noticed a breeze. Grace was in the kitchen when I arrived, pouring cereal. She looked up, surprised. "You're home?" she asked. I nodded. "Early this time." She gave a half smile, more reflex than warmth, then returned to her bowl. That night I told Lily everything, that I'd quit, that I wasn't going back, that I wanted to try again. Not just with Grace, but with her, with us. She didn't cry. She didn't celebrate. She simply nodded as if to say, "We'll see." It wasn't approval. It wasn't hope. It was the beginning of a test. The next morning I woke before sunrise and made pancakes. Burnt the first batch. Lily laughed quietly when she came downstairs, surprised by the smell of something other than black coffee and printer paper. Grace walked in, eyes still adjusting to the light. "Why are you cooking?" she asked, suspicious. I shrugged, thought I'd give it a shot. She watched me plate the pancakes, lumpy, uneven but golden, and sat down slowly. She didn't say much, but she ate every bite. After breakfast, I offered to drive her to school. She hesitated. "It's okay," I said quickly. "No pressure." She looked at Lily, who gave her a gentle nod. "Fine," Grace said. "But don't make it weird." We rode in silence most of the way. I didn't push, just let the silence sit between us, not as punishment, but as space. I dropped her off with a quiet, "Have a good day." She mumbled, "You too," before closing the door. When I got home, I opened YouTube and typed, "How to make lasagna from scratch." That afternoon, I spent 3 hours ruining the kitchen. Tomato sauce on the counter, burned garlic, wrong noodles, but I made something edible. That evening, we ate together, all 3 of us. No phones, no TV, just chewing, soft conversation, eye contact. After dinner, I offered to clean up. Lily looked surprised but didn't object. The following days, I repeated the pattern. I took Grace to school. I picked her up. I helped with homework. Not that I understood middle school math anymore, but I was there. I sat next to her, asked questions, learned what I didn't know. I learned her best friend's name was Emma, that she hated gym class, that she'd stopped drawing because it made her sad. I didn't try to fix it. I just listened. I asked Lily if she wanted to go out on a walk one evening. We strolled slowly through the neighborhood. She talked about her students. I asked about her favorite lesson plans. We talked like people who once knew each other, but forgot the rhythm of familiarity. Each moment felt fragile, like walking on thawing ice. But I kept walking. I didn't post any of it online, no updates, no announcements, because this wasn't a performance. It was a quiet rebellion against the version of me I used to be. I had no idea if it would work, but for the first time in years, I was finally showing up. The first week back home felt like walking through someone else's life. Grace still didn't speak to me unless she had to. No smiles, no jokes, no offhand teenage sarcasm. Just clipped answers and a look that hovered somewhere between indifference and suspicion. She didn't look me in the eye. Even when I said good morning, she responded without lifting her gaze from her cereal bowl. It wasn't rudeness. It was protection. A child's quiet armor against disappointment. One evening, as I stood at the stove attempting chicken stir-fry, I asked, "Want to help me set the table?" She didn't respond. I turned, saw her glance toward Lily, then quietly walked to the living room instead. That night, after Grace went to bed, Lily and I sat on the back porch. The air was cool, and the street lamp cast a soft glow across the lawn. "She's still closed off," I said. "She doesn't trust this," Lily replied. "This?" "You, the change, the effort. It feels temporary to her. She's seen flashes of hope before, David, and every time you disappeared again." I nodded slowly. I know I can't blame her. Lily sipped her tea. "Just don't come back into her life unless you're planning to stay this time," she said. "She won't survive another exit." That line hit harder than any of the arguments we'd ever had. "I'm not leaving," I said quietly. "She needs time to believe that." The next afternoon, I came home early from a grocery run. The house was quiet. Lily was still at school for a parent-teacher meeting. Grace, I assumed, was in her room. As I walked past the hallway bathroom, I heard a rustling sound, paper, hurried movement. The door was slightly ajar. Curiosity made me pause. I peeked inside and saw Grace kneeling in front of the trash bin, hands full of torn paper, bright colors, fragments of faces, strands of brown crayon hair. She didn't notice me at first. She was holding one half of a drawing, herself, clearly, smiling, reaching out toward someone on the other side of the page. Then she tore it in half, and then again, and again, until the pieces were no bigger than confetti. She stood, wiped her face. Had she been crying? And flushed the toilet. Not to use it, just to drown the sound. Then she dropped the scraps into the bin and walked out, never seeing me frozen by the door. I waited a full minute before stepping inside. The trash was still open. I reached in and carefully pulled out the pieces. I sat on the edge of the tub and tried to reconstruct it. A park, a bench, Grace sitting on one side. A man, me I assumed, on the other. A book in between. A small dog curled at their feet. She'd drawn it with care, detail, intent. It wasn't old either. The ink was fresh. The crayon hadn't smudged yet. I looked down at the scraps spread across my lap and understood something very clearly. She had wanted to believe. She'd tried. quietly, privately. Maybe she'd drawn it after our drive to school, or after the first dinner we shared in weeks. Maybe she was testing hope inch by inch, but something in her still didn't trust it. So she destroyed it before I could. Not in anger, in self-defense. Because if she waited too long for me to notice and I didn't, the hurt would be worse than never drawing it at all. That night, I didn't mention the drawing. I didn't tell Lily. I didn't confront Grace. Instead, I taped the pieces back together in my office, carefully, deliberately. I didn't fix the tears. I didn't cover the seams. I wanted the scars to show. Then I pinned it to the wall above my desk, the same wall that used to hold my awards and contracts. The same wall I had cleared not long ago. Now it held only one thing: the broken image of a daughter reaching for her father. And maybe, just maybe, a father reaching back. I stopped apologizing. Not because I wasn't sorry, God knows I was, but because I finally understood that words were the cheapest currency in my household. I had spent years spending "I'm sorry" like pocket change. It had no value left, so instead, I sat. I sat beside Grace at the kitchen table while she sketched. I didn't interrupt, didn't hover, didn't ask to see. I didn't offer advice or praise. I just sat. She didn't acknowledge me at first, but she didn't ask me to leave either. That felt like a victory. Some days I'd bring her a snack without saying anything. Just place it next to her, then return to my spot across the table. One day, she slid it back toward me, untouched. The next day, she took a bite, then two. I celebrated in silence. One evening, while Lily was at a late staff meeting, Grace sat in the living room with a sketch pad on her lap. I walked in, hesitated, then lowered myself onto the floor beside the couch. She didn't look up. I pulled out a crossword puzzle and worked in silence. After 15 minutes, she asked, without glancing over, "What's a 7-letter word for someone who leaves too much?" I blinked, stunned, then smiled. "Regret." She smirked, just a little. 2 on the nose. We kept going like that. Small moments, tiny exchanges. Nothing heavy, nothing direct. Just space. And slowly, the space between us became less suffocating. A week later, she was sketching again. I sat nearby, pretending to read. She turned her page once, then again, then paused. I didn't look up. She cleared her throat, nudged something across the table. A pencil. I raised my eyes. She didn't speak, just nodded toward her sketchbook. "Draw something," she said. "Me?" "You," she confirmed. "Let's see if you even remember how to hold a pencil." I chuckled nervously, took the pencil and stared at the blank half-page she'd left for me. "What should I draw?" "Whatever," she said. "Just don't make it a pie chart." I grinned. No promises. I drew slowly, badly. A lopsided dog, 2 crooked stick figures. She leaned over, laughing. "That's supposed to be me?" "I never claimed to be an artist," I said, pretending to be insulted. She shook her head, still smiling. "Well, don't quit your day job. Too late." The moment was light, but it meant everything. Later that night, after she went to bed, I walked into my office and looked at the taped-up pieces of the torn drawing, the one I'd found in the trash and reassembled. Still crooked, still scarred, but still here. I stood in front of it and made a decision. I reached into the drawer, found an empty frame, one that had held a sales award years ago, and replaced the certificate with the taped-up drawing. I hung it carefully, centered on the once proud wall. It wasn't beautiful, but it was honest. That weekend, Lily suggested we go to the park. Just the 3 of us. We packed sandwiches, grabbed a blanket. I expected awkward silence, but Grace brought her sketch pad and sat beside me while I read. At one point, she nudged me again. "You should try again," she said. "Draw better this time." I did. Still bad, but slightly less bad. She didn't laugh this time. She just nodded. Getting there. The following Monday, I was in my office working on a meal plan when Grace walked in. She stood in front of the taped-up drawing, eyes narrowing slightly. "You kept it," she said. "I did." "You framed it." "I did." She was quiet for a long moment, then said softly, "It wasn't supposed to be you in that one. Not originally." I turned to her. "No?" "No," she said. "But I wanted it to be, and I didn't want to be disappointed again." I nodded. She stepped closer, touching the frame with her fingertips. "I'm glad you kept it," she said. And for the first time in years, she turned to me, really turned to me, and said, "Want to draw something together?" "Absolutely." The school gym had been transformed into an art gallery. Paper streamers in pastel colors hung from the ceiling. Student artwork lined every inch of the walls. Proud parents milled around, snapping pictures and pointing with soft gasps of admiration. It smelled faintly of glue, crayons, and cafeteria pizza. Chaotic, warm, familiar. I stood near the back, clutching a folded event program, scanning the room for Grace. "She's in Section 3, Lily whispered beside me, "by the west wall." We moved slowly, weaving between clusters of excited families and displays. My eyes darted across dozens of colorful pieces, abstract animals, sunrises, glitter-filled dreamscapes, until I saw her. Grace stood near her display, shifting nervously from one foot to the other. Her hair was tied back, and she wore her favorite hoodie, the one with paint stains on the sleeves. A few classmates chatted beside her. When she spotted us, her posture straightened, but she didn't wave, just a small smile. We approached, and Lily gave her a gentle side hug. I nodded, unsure how to navigate this public moment. Grace gestured to her drawing, taped to a large white board. "That's mine," she said. It was a simple scene, but one that stopped my breath. A house, not overly detailed, just enough to feel real. Slanted roof, white walls, a small porch. In the front yard, her mother was watering flowers, bent over with a green hose in her hand. To the right, Grace sat on a picnic blanket, book in her lap, eyes focused. And next to her, me. I was sitting cross-legged, holding a crayon. My figure was detailed. Soft lines around the eyes, graying hair, a small smile. A second coloring book lay open between us. The caption below read, "Home, finally complete." I stared at it longer than I probably should have. Something pressed behind my eyes. Lily squeezed my arm lightly. Grace said nothing, but she watched me with the guarded expression of someone waiting for a test result. "It's beautiful," I managed. My voice was too quiet, but she heard. "You don't look too bad either," she said, trying to be casual. I chuckled, blinking fast. "I like the socks." In the drawing, I wore ridiculous striped socks. She'd added them just for fun, I guessed. "That was Emma's idea," she said. "She said it looked too serious." Well, I think she was right. A pause. "I wasn't sure I should include you," Grace admitted. "At first, it was just going to be me and Mom." My heart clenched. "But then I remembered that day in the park," she added quickly. "You sat with me, drew the dog again. It was still terrible. I've had no formal training." She smirked, eyes flicking back to the drawing. "I wanted to draw something true," she said. "So I drew what it feels like now." I looked at her again. Not the drawing, but her. Her eyes weren't guarded anymore. Not wide open either, but soft. Open enough. "I'm glad I made it into the frame," I said. She shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "Don't get used to it. I've got standards now." The crowd buzzed around us, voices rising and falling. But in that moment, the world narrowed. Just the three of us, standing in front of a picture not just drawn, but earned. For so long, I had thought of home as a place I paid for, a space I built with paychecks and insurance plans. But Grace's drawing reminded me what it really was. Home wasn't square footage. It wasn't stability or safety deposits. Home was the moments you show up for, the people you sit beside, the drawings you get invited into. Later that night, as we drove home, Grace looked out the window and said quietly, "I saved the original sketch for that one." "Yeah? It's in my drawer, not torn." I smiled, eyes fixed on the road. "That's good." She hesitated, then added, "If you want, maybe next week we can try painting something together." My chest tightened. "I'd love that," I said. And for the first time in years, I wasn't painting over regrets. I was starting with a blank canvas. I published the blog post on a rainy Sunday afternoon. It wasn't planned. There was no brand strategy, no promotional rollout, no clever headline. Just me, sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open and a cup of black coffee going cold beside me. The words came easily, because they weren't polished. They weren't for a client or an audience or a quarterly report. They were for me. And for any man out there who might be standing where I once stood, successful, respected, and completely alone. I titled it, "The Picture I Never Saw." I began by recounting the details, how I had climbed the ladder, how I believed I was doing it all for them. I painted the image of conference calls during birthday parties, silent dinners, missed recitals, and the hollow promise of, "I'll make it up to you." I described the night Grace was in the hospital, the email from Lily, the sketchbook with a final page left blank. I didn't spare myself. I didn't ask for sympathy. I just told the truth. And the truth was simple. I had once believed that being a good provider made me a good father, that a stable home, private school tuition, and a six-figure salary were enough to say, "I love you." But love, I'd learned, isn't built on deposits. It's built on presence. I wrote about the silence at our dinner table, the ache of hearing my daughter say she used to have a dad, the quiet grief that seeps into a house when one person starts disappearing, piece by piece, email by email. Then I wrote about the shift, about walking away from the career that had defined me for 20 years, about burning pancakes and riding shotgun to school drop-offs, about coloring with Grace in the living room, about watching her hesitate before inviting me into her world again. And finally, I shared the moment that wrecked me in the best possible way. Standing in front of her school art exhibit, seeing the drawing of our family, complete, whole, forgiven, I ended with this. Making $1 million is easier than rebuilding the trust of a child. It takes time, it takes patience, and it takes showing up. Not just once, but always. The picture I love most in this world, I've never actually seen, because I wasn't there when it was drawn. I hit publish before I could overthink it. Then I closed the laptop and went to the living room, where Grace was sprawled on the rug with her watercolors. She didn't know about the post. I didn't plan to show her. It wasn't for her. It was because of her. That night, the blog quietly made its way into the world. It didn't go viral, it didn't trend, but it found its way to inboxes and message boards, to men sitting in corner offices, to mothers holding families together, to people trying, quietly, clumsily, to do better. A few days later, I received an email from a man in Arizona. Your story reminded me that I still have time. Thank you. Another came from a teacher in Oregon. I shared your words with a parent who never shows up. I hope he reads it. I didn't need applause. I didn't want recognition. I had already been seen, truly seen, by the only audience that ever mattered.